My name is Jim. I dedicated my entire career to being a truck driver. During my early years of this profession, when I was in my late 20s, I had a remarkable encounter that permanently shifted my outlook on the paranormal. On a rainy autumn evening in Haynesville, Maine, I had just crossed the Canadian border into the U.S., hauling a fresh load of timber. I had a few lumber yard deliveries to complete before heading back to the depot. We were running behind schedule that day because of the storm that had rolled through the previous night and early morning. Cruising down Route 21, I had the radio tuned in and my attention firmly directed at the road ahead. The landscape offered little to see, comprising only the unending rows of trees that ran alongside the road, their presence faintly revealed by the dim, cloudy night. It was an isolated road, particularly quiet during the nighttime, given that Haynesville County lacked any significant population center. I was quite familiar with this route, as it was a frequent one for me. Right as I approached the town, which consisted no more of a town hall, cemetery, and a few scattered homes, I was approaching a sharp 90-degree curve. This bend posed a fair amount of danger, especially under wet conditions. As I neared the bend, I noticed an unusual, fleeting light in the woods that briefly glimmered before fading away. It struck me as odd, but my primary concern was navigating the upcoming turn. After safely maneuvering the bend, I proceeded toward my destination. With my windshield wipers in motion and Leonard Skinner playing, I started to make out what appeared to be a person standing at the forest edge. Attempting to get a closer glimpse, I saw that the figure had vanished. However, as I returned my focus to the road, my eyes widened, and my heart raced when I noticed a woman standing right in the middle of the street. I slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting her. My truck skidded as I attempted to come to a halt. I rushed toward the woman. She turned her head and fixed her gaze upon me, with an emotionless expression just moments before our collision. The screeching of the brakes persisted, followed by the unmistakable crash when my truck struck the woman. Panic surged through me, and I found myself uttering curses under my breath while attempting to manage the situation. Finally, the truck came to a complete stop. The music played on, and my heart continued to race as I took a brief moment, still in my seat, to process the sudden and unexpected incident. I swung open the truck door and stepped out, preparing to see a gruesome sight. As I advanced towards the front of the vehicle, I called out to her. To my utter astonishment, as I reached the spot where she should have been hit, there was nothing there. Perplexed, I examined the truck's grill, searching for any signs of blood or remnants of the woman. But all I found was the light drizzle causing water droplets to drip. I continued to shout for the woman, but my cries were only met with the noises of the wind whispering through the leaves of the nearby trees and the soft continuing drizzle. I persisted in circling my truck, scanning every corner, both sides, underneath, and the surrounding road, searching for any sign of her. Something on the road caught my attention, and upon closer inspection, I found a single red high heel lying there. Squatting down, I examined it carefully before picking it up. Surprisingly, there was no sign of blood, and it seemed brand new. Baffled by this discovery, I looked around again just before I made my way back to the cab of the truck. As I neared the door, I detected faint noises emanating from the nearby trees. Initially, I brushed it off and proceeded back to the truck's cab. Yet, the sounds persisted, growing louder and sounding like someone in distress calling for help. "Is anyone out there?" I yelled into the night. In reply, a voice from the trees implored, "Please help me." I quickly headed towards the source of the voice, drawn by their ongoing plea. Upon reaching the edge of the forest where the voice had originated, the plea for help abruptly ceased. I inquired, "Can you still hear me? Where are you?" But received no response. I considered the possibility that it might be the woman that I had struck, yet I couldn't make sense of the absence of any evidence, aside from the solitary red heel. Persistently, I called out while venturing further into the underbrush, but there was still no response. I spent several minutes searching the area, trudging through the damp foliage. Suddenly, a faint light began to emanate deeper within the forest. I continued my calls as I moved closer to the light. However, just like the earlier light I had observed on the road, it vanished, leaving me alone in the cold and wet darkness of the woods. Stranded in the pitch-black darkness without any flashlight, I decided that my best option was to reach out to the local authorities using my truck's CB radio. I retraced my steps back to the truck, and as I approached, I made out what seemed to be a figure in the passenger seat of the cab. I rushed to the door, flung it open, and peered inside, only to find the seat empty. A profound sense of unease began to settle in. With the red heel still clutched to my hand, I leaped into the cab and began the process of seeking assistance. It didn't take long before I received the assurance that help was on its way. Despite my growing apprehension, I chose to remain at the scene because I was concerned about the possibility of having hit someone and being responsible for a hit and run. While waiting for the authorities to arrive, I continued to survey the surroundings from the truck's seat. The rain intensified, making any attempt to navigate through the woods increasingly unlikely. This is an opportune moment to mention the highway's notorious reputation for being haunted. There's even a song titled "A Tombstone Every Mile," written by Dick Curleys, that chronicles the hazards of this road and the numerous truckers and individuals who have lost their lives along it. Despite having traversed this stretch numerous times, I had never encountered any strange occurrences. The realization that someone might be injured or deceased nearby weighed heavily on me. But there was also an eerie sense that something paranormal was unfolding. As I pondered how to explain the situation to the police, 15 minutes of anxious anticipation passed until I heard the sirens drawing closer. Just as they arrived, I grabbed an umbrella from the cab and promptly exited. "Good evening, sir. Are you Jim?" I affirmed. While we convened, one of the officers had his flashlight out, sweeping the surroundings. While seeking shelter under our umbrellas, I provided a thorough explanation of the situation to the officers. I recounted the discovery of the red heel, and they asked me for it as potential evidence. Returning to the cab, I was taken aback when I realized the heel had disappeared. I meticulously searched the entire interior of the truck, but it was nowhere to be found. "I'm sorry, officers, but it appears I have misplaced it," I explained as I stepped out of the vehicle. The officers advised me to stay in the truck while they conducted a thorough search of the area, but they didn't discover anything unusual. Eventually, I was informed that I could depart, with the possibility of being contacted for further questioning in the future. I expressed my gratitude and then continued my route to my stop. While I was driving, exhaustion gradually taking its toll, I heard faint whispers coming from the right. Turning my head to check, I saw that same red heel resting on the passenger seat. A sense of dread washed over me as my mind raced to comprehend the situation. Despite the sinking feeling in my chest, I didn't feel threatened, and I managed to convince myself that it must be some odd ghostly token of appreciation for something I couldn't comprehend until days later. In the woods beside the road, concealed the deteriorated body of a woman who had been found to be deceased for several months. Following that incident, I haven't had any more unusual encounters, but I retained the red heel, feeling that it was her wish. At one juncture, I contemplated donating it as a haunted artifact, but my shyness and fear of being dismissed prevented me from sharing my story. As a result, over 40 years later, the heel remains preserved in a box tucked away in my dresser.